Hey everyone. This is going to be a video explaining some very common mistakes that new Vice City runners make, and why you should avoid them as a beginner. They're in no particular order, as I feel they're all equally as important, but without further ado, let's get started with number 1, which is doing any percent as your first runs. So this one is understandable if you're new to Vice City speedrunning, as any percent is the first category most people think of when it comes to speedrunning, and Vice City any percent is only 8 minutes long, so surely it can't be that hard, right? Wrong. Any percent is actually absurdly complicated and not beginner friendly at all. Do not run this category when you are new to the game. Run any percent no issue instead, as even though it's much longer, it's also a lot easier to learn and much more beginner friendly. You'll thank yourself later, trust me. The same goes for other categories such as all missions and 100%. You should only really pick these up when you have a firm grasp of how the glitches work. And that brings me on to number 2, which is learning how but not why. Many runners will follow my video tutorials and simply blindly follow the instructions. This does work, but not really for the long term. As in your speedrunning adventures, you will encounter a lot of dilemmas, which are easily fixable if you understand the fundamentals of Vice City speedrunning. This includes things such as on-mission flag manipulation, AI manipulation, duping, and instapassing. Many beginners do not learn why these strategies work, and that causes many unnecessary resets because they only know how to do everything one way. This brings me nicely onto number 3, which is learning backups and beginner strats. Many beginners will try and replicate the world record and struggle due to the complexity of the strategies, and also the inconsistencies. Many of the fastest strats in Vice City are really not consistent, for example using a cop car to set up the Jury Fury dupe right at the start of the game. I've seen completely new runners resetting for a lucky cop car spawn, even though there's a fully consistent setup that is only 15 seconds slower. Learn the beginner strategies, and learn the backups in case these fail. I see many beginners fail a lot at the cherry poppers instapassing stage, but there are a dozen backups to keep the run going, and if you learn them all, it is truly impossible to fully kill a run here. Please learn these backups, people. While we are on the topic of inconsistencies, let's jump into number 4, which is doing runs when you're not consistent. A fairly common mistake beginners will do is misjudge when they are ready to do attempts. There's two extremes here. Beginners who will not finish any runs until they are quote perfect, and beginners who will attempt runs when they cannot consistently complete certain missions. A big beginner consistency milestone is Death Row, as it requires a lot of quick transitioning between helicopter flying into shooting, then doing AI manipulation to get Lance out of the scrapyard alive, and then finally a tricky heli landing. This is pretty subjective, but personally I see absolutely no reason to grind attempts if you cannot pass this mission at least 80% of the time as a beginner. Ramming your head against the wall isn't going to make you any better, but practice will.
Got practice. Practice. And if you're not practicing, you should be practicing. So keep practicing. It's the only way you're gonna get better. It's the only way you're gonna be number one. Number one in anything. You need to practice.
Number 5 is super important, and it's all about not spending years perfecting the early parts of the run. Vice City early game is brutal. There is a ton of very fast motorbike driving where you need to make a lot of quick decisions to not get absolutely obliterated by the traffic. This, however, will come with a lot of hours of practice over months and even years. There's no need to constantly reset the early game to perfection when you have 10 minutes to save later on in the run. Purely by doing attempts, you will get a lot of early game practice, but make sure you are competent at the later sections, otherwise you'll just end up throwing run after run for no reason later on. For a reference, a competent endgame from Copland finish until the timer stops at the end of the run is around 12.5 minutes. If you're pulling 15 to 20 minute endgames, focus on improving that section rather than spamming early game resets. An honourable mention is not using the many community hubs and resources available to you. Our leaderboard on speedrun.com has written in video guides, as well as practice saves and full documentation on the strats that we use. Furthermore, the GTA Speedrunning Discord server has help channels where you can ask any question or get help with parts of the run that you're struggling with. Be sure to get involved. I asked a million questions when I first started, and it helped me out a lot. This about wraps up this video. These were more generic tips for beginners, but I would definitely be open to making more specific videos in the future detailing common mechanical mistakes that beginners do as well. If that sounds interesting to you at all, then be sure to let me know in the comments, and I'll leave links for the community resources in the description, as well as my tutorials for speedrunning Vice City that you can learn from. Good luck with your future runs, and I'll see you all in the next video.